2014, Nas Daily made a video in which he got complete strangers to solve a cube one move at a time as he traveled around the world. I remember watching it ages ago and thinking, that's really cool. With the World Cubing Championships here in my home country, I knew that top speed cubers from all around the world were together in one place, and so I thought, wouldn't it be cool if not strangers, but speed cubers could solve one cube one move at a time? But the question was, how could I get them all to solve the cube in a way that was visible, so that the viewer could see exactly what was happening to the cube as it was being solved? I decided I was going to have to construct a custom camera rig just for this video. The first stop was to Bunnings Warehouse, an Australian hardware chain store. I went straight to the angle brackets to see if by chance I could find some piece of metal that could do the job. I found a few contenders in which I could possibly see where I might put the cube and where the GoPro would go. Then I bought a few different nuts and bolts for mounting and went home to see if I could piece this thing together. I found out that if I screwed the two pieces together in a certain way, not only would I get the cube and the camera the perfect distance apart, but I would also end up with a really convenient handle. I spray painted the whole rig black because black things are cool, and then I had to start thinking about the cube. I opted to go for a stickered cube for the more classic look, initially choosing to use an old Garn 3x3 that I had. But there was one slight problem with this cube, and it was that after every turn, it wasn't guaranteed that the layers would completely align for the next person. And for the purpose of this video, it was really important that the cube looked the same at the end of one shot and at the start of the next one. So I knew I was going to have to use a magnetic puzzle, so I chose the smoothest and the cheapest one that I had, which is the Houston Kylan V2. I removed the white center cap and spent ages wondering how I would possibly fix the top of this screw to the center of the cube in a way that was really firm, but that also would not mess with the internals and would still allow the cube to turn. Eventually I realized that the best way to do it was to glue the screw to the center cap. Not only would this provide a strong and tight seal, but it would also let me remove the cube when it was not in use, because the last thing that I want is for this thing to break. Of course, the downside is that that center cap is now permanently glued to that screw, plus after a bit of wear and tear, some of the bits have broken off, but I would say it's worth it. And this cube still is solvable. Once I was happy with the field of view and how everything was set up, the next problem was the scramble. I knew that visually, it'd be really cool to have moves that predominantly occurred on this side of the cube. It wouldn't be nice if I was mostly just doing front moves and things like that. Also, because of the way the cube was mounted, the only wide moves that could be done were wide U moves, which I knew would make algorithms that required wide right or wide front moves a bit difficult. And so predicting I'd have about 50 solvers, I wrote 50 randomish moves from 1 to 50, and then in the next column, wrote the inverse of the same move. Thinking that if I applied the 50 moves as a scramble, all they would have to do is to do the inverse, reversed, and they would solve the cube. But there were a few problems with that idea. For starters, whenever I tried doing the 50 moves and then undoing it, I kept messing it up. And then I thought, if this is happening to me, only one person has to make a mistake, and this entire thing would be stuffed. This was a big source of stress. I still remember being on day 2 of the competition, sitting outside the venue, thinking, this is not gonna work. I made this whole thing for nothing. I knew that I could just do a normal solve, but the problem was that the average CFOP solve is anywhere between like 60, 70, 80 or 90 moves, and I just didn't want the video to be that long. And then, Eureka! Eureka! I thought, what if I did a random scramble, but then solved the cross and made the first couple of F12 pairs maybe like really easy? Part of me didn't like it because it felt like I was cheating, but on the other hand, my goal was to make a video that was fun to watch, that involved many people solving one cube, and the alternative was not having a video at all. This was low risk, would still be really fun, and so I thought, let's give it a go. My one regret in this video was not saving the scramble or keeping track of my initial setup moves, but thankfully the cubing historian actually reverse engineered this solve and figured out the initial state of the cube as well as every step in this 40 move solve. As you can see, the first few pairs were super easy, and the third pair was a really lucky 3-move insert as well. Antoine Cantan, a really good speed cuber from Canada, gave me a really cool algorithm for the 4th pair, but unfortunately I sort of forgot it along the way. Sorry, Antoine. However, with the help of some other cubers, we found a way of doing that 4th pair that cancelled into the OLL, which was even better. It was thankfully one of the P-shaped 6-move OLLs, but we did have to tell people doing the algorithm what move would come next. Felix Zemdex was one of the people in the OLL phase, and I'll never forget, I went up to him and sort of just for fun I said, can you guess what the next move is? And he completely knew, like, even though it was like mid-OLL, he knew what the next move was. And I probably should have learned from asking the first time, but I said, sort of jokingly, can you guess what the PLL is going to be? And he said, yeah, it's an F-pound. And initially I wasn't sure if he was joking too, but then of course it ended up being an F-pound. I'm really sorry that I doubted you, Felix.
I wasn't doing anything.
I didn't even tell you what to do. Nice.
So eventually we got to that F-pound, which I must say was a pretty hard one to keep track of. Plus, a couple of people actually made mistakes, which I only realized afterwards, and had to sort of undo moves, and therefore, sadly, ended up dropping people from the video. I even had Patrick Ponce and like Max Park in this video, but due to my pretty unclear instructions, they ended up doing some of the wrong moves, and that was really sad. But it does mean this cube was still handled by them, and that's pretty cool. But eventually we got there, and the cube was solved on the very last day. Here's a little Easter egg with the prize ceremony happening in the background. You can't actually see that in the video, but that was what was happening in the background when Ola and I were doing our little dorky dance. And then finally, it was a matter of getting all the footage lined up, rotating, coloring, adding music, and timing the cuts to the beat, and that was how I made this video. Thanks again so much to everyone who was a part of solving this cube, as well as the people who sort of came along for the ride and gave me some really good ideas along the way. Comment below with some ideas on what I should do now with this humble little cube who's had some turns by some of the world's best speed cubers. Should I frame it? Should I chuck it? Auction it? Should I send it to the moon? Alright, thanks for watching. Till next time.
Success!